My name is Matthew Cassel. I'm a photographer and a journalist. I grew up Jewish in America, and I support the Palestinian struggle against occupation. Support for Zionism and Israel is strong in the Jewish American community, and my support for Palestinians has caused a rift in my family. After traveling in America to better understand US support for Israel, I'm now headed to the Middle East to retrace my own story and see the conflict through the eyes of those who live it. In many ways, the story of modern Zionism starts in Europe, with Great Britain playing a prominent role. After World War I and the breakup of the Ottoman Empire, Britain took control of the land of Palestine. During 28 years of the British Mandate, thousands of Jews fled anti-Semitic attacks in Europe and immigrated to Palestine with the hopes of establishing a homeland. In 1948, British rule came to an end in Palestine, and the State of Israel was declared on May 14th. London's East End has hosted immigrants from around the world, most recently from the Indian subcontinent. But at the turn of the 20th century, this district largely consisted of Jewish immigrants who had fled anti-Semitic attacks in Eastern Europe. You go to the mosque, you attend the mosque. I was curious if it used to be a synagogue. Are you familiar with that?
This one?
Yeah, Jewish synagogue.
Yeah, a long time ago. Yeah, this one.
Do most people know about how it used to be a synagogue?
No.
No? No one knows the history.
Okay.
All right, thank you, brother.
Thank you.
Salam. In 1896, Theodor Herzl, a Jewish writer from Austria-Hungary, addressed a large rally in the East End, calling for the return of the Jewish people to Palestine. He would later be considered by many to be the founder of modern Zionism and a major catalyst for the creation of Israel. I was in London to promote a book that I co-edited, written by Arab writers whose countries were swept up in the wave of Arab uprisings in 2011. The Frontline Club hosted a panel discussion with the editors and authors. Some people are very optimistic, some people are hopeful, some people are pessimistic, but there was a process that happened, an uprising, and I haven't gotten any sense of really regret from people who took part in it.
People still don't know what the freedom means, and all what they want now to see a president or a prime minister every 4 years. But what they see really need to change is the society itself.
It's a great pleasure to be here with these 4 individuals tonight. Thank you all for coming and contributing.
Journalist Rachel Shabi came to moderate the discussion. She comes from an Arab Jewish family who left their native Iraq after Israel's creation. We met up the next day at Edgware Road, which has long been a hub for Arab culture in London.
So in the 80s, this was like the place where you'd go to feel like you were in a Middle Eastern environment, and you can see all the Arabic newspapers are here.
In her writing, Rachel argues that Jewish nationalism and the creation of Israel in 1948 forced Arab Jewish communities to abandon the countries they had been living in for centuries.
The Iraqi Jewish community was 2,000 years old. It was big, it was vibrant. At one point, it was a quarter of the population of Baghdad.
Why did they leave? Did they want to leave?
Why their life became untenable in the Middle East. So it uprooted communities of Jews that had long-standing, deep-held, very integrated relationships in the Middle East. They had a hybrid identity, Arab Jew, that became extinct because of Zionism. There are 2 different diametrically opposed movements seeking your loyalty and seeking your allegiance, so which one are you? Zionism and Israel were saying, well, you're Jewish. We have the answer to you. Your identity questions are answered here.
Why can't they be Arab, Jewish, and part of Israel at the same time?
Because that wasn't the identity that Israel wanted of itself. I mean, Israel sees itself as a European country that somehow took the wrong turn and ended up in the Middle East.
So how do you identify?
Well, I'm a hybrid too. I identify myself as British, but I do have a Jewish Iraqi heritage.
I also struggle with the question of my identity. Because Israel claims to be the home for Jewish people, many in the Arab world conflate Judaism with Israel, so it's not always easy to discuss my Jewish background in the Middle East. I spent more than 4 years living in Beirut, from 2007 until 2011. Although I love Chicago and the people there, there's a certain indescribable warmth in the Middle East that I feel many people have always offered me as a foreigner. Mo Ali is one of my closest friends, who I met when I first came to Lebanon.
We've been living together since 2007, so I've seen the ups and downs.
Ups and downs of what?
Of being in Beirut.
Ah, okay. Mo is a journalist and still lives in the apartment we used to share.
It gets loud, it gets dusty. You feel like people are with you in the same balcony. It's cool. It's a bit messy.
This apartment has always felt like home to me, and I was happy when I saw that many of the photos I'd taken of Palestinian life in refugee camps were still hanging on the walls. How did we meet?
You said that you were looking for a roommate, and I was looking for a place to stay.
Yeah.
But then you said the place needs a lot of work. And I said, I'll take that task.
And you never did.
I painted the whole place.
The place was even more of a mess back then, huh?
It's true, was more of a mess. But then, 6 years later, here we are.
I remember just before we met, I met our friend Rima, and I asked her, I think it was like my first or second day in Lebanon, and I asked her, so which religion do you belong to? And she almost smacked me.
I remember that.
Why is that such a sensitive issue in this country?
Well,
why can't you ask people about that?
I remember that, yeah, you two asked me, and I was like, why this guy is asking me what is my sect? This is a crucial issue for me. I don't want to be part of a group or a tribe. I want to be part of the collective. I don't see what's difference it makes if one is Sunni or one is Shia.
Judaism is recognized
Yes.
as an official
So we have
sect
18
in this country,
sects
right?
in Lebanon.
Yeah.
One of them is Judaism, and it's recognized as another sect. See, the thing is that there was never anti-Semitic sentiments towards the Jews in here as there was anti-Semitism in Europe, for instance, Nazism and the Spanish Inquisition times. They were not perceived as an outsider element. They were perceived as everyone else in the country. Things start going bad after 48, and not directly after 48, actually. After there has been some rumors or news spread against the Jews in Lebanon or in the Arab world as being collaborators to this new Jewish states that just got rebuilt in the middle of the Middle East.
Obviously, I wasn't going around telling people, that my background's Jewish. That would have been a little weird, right? How do you think people would have reacted, or would react?
It could have created some sort of awkwardness in certain places. It could have been dangerous for you in places of ignorance on the matter, on the topic.
Mo's wife, Layla, is a clothing designer from London. And like Rachel Shalby, she comes from an Arab-Jewish background. Her family fled Lebanon during the Civil War.
My father was born here.
But you didn't live here, you lived in the UK,
No, I
right?
never came here until I met Mo.
But did you grow up identifying as Lebanese or?
Yes and no, like you grow up in like a really multicultural community, you don't really ever identify yourself as anything. I mean, I identified myself as a Londoner. But I definitely felt more from my father than from the rest of my family, more Arab than I did a Jew.
Yeah,
I don't know,
explain that.
I don't know, it was now saying that, I don't know if that's true. It's kind of all mixed into one, really. I feel it's hard to separate the Jewishness from the Arab, the Lebanese-ness in my family. I feel they're both like as one. I didn't even know until I was probably too old that there wasn't such thing as Jewish Arabs.
In the US, like being Jewish kind of is almost synonymous with being a supporter of Israel.
Yeah.
Did you ever feel similarly?
I don't think so, because I think like I was quite ignorant and it was never talked about in my family. So
So
yeah.
you never felt any connection?
No, not at all. But I think in Europe it's different is in America. Like, I don't know if like being a Jew is so synonymous with being an Israeli or whatever, being a Zionist.
When you're like in Lebanon, you're going around, do you feel ever uncomfortable talking about your Jewish background?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I would be very picky about who I told those kind of things to. I mean,
Why?
A lot of people think that Jews equals Israelis, and obviously this country is at war with Israel.
And people have a very kind of difficult history here in this country.
Yeah,
with
of course,
Israel,
you can't
haven't
blame them, right? I mean, obviously that makes sense. If they've never been educated that an Israeli and a Jew are different things, then you can understand that reaction totally. I mean, of course, it's not like I wouldn't hold it against them.
We decided to get married, a civil marriage, based on our own beliefs that we are both non-religious, non-sectarian people. I had to go through the Mukhtar, which is the notary office.
Yeah, I remember.
He pulled out a book, an ancient book, really big, black covers. He went through the names until he got to your last name, Tawtah.
Yeah.
And he stopped at it and like gave me a look and said, "They are Jews." Did you know that? I was like, yeah, I knew it.
It's fine.
It's
Don't
completely
worry.
fine. Let's not stop at it. But to him,
he just wanted to warn you.
It took him an extra 2 minutes to digest that thought.
According to most estimates, there are only a few dozen Jews remaining in Lebanon. All that's left of this once vibrant community is whispers. A synagogue, a Jewish cemetery. The head of the Jewish community in Lebanon was afraid to speak to us because of the increasing sectarian tensions in the country.
I came to Lebanon because I wanted to understand the situation for Palestinian refugees in this country. And when I came, it was in the middle of a battle in the Nahra Bered refugee camp in northern Lebanon between the Lebanese army and militants from a group called Fatah al-Islam. The army went into the camp to try to root out 150 fighters or so. They ended up destroying the entire camp of 40,000 people, leveling it to the ground, forcing the inhabitants from the camp to flee the camp with nothing but the clothes on their back. After the fighting had ended, I was documenting their kind of struggle to return to their refugee camp in Nahra Bered.
This isn't the first time that they had been made refugees. In 1948, the creation of the State of Israel forced more than 700,000 Palestinians to flee their homes into neighboring countries like Lebanon. Palestinians refer to this period as a Nakba, which is Arabic for the catastrophe.
Palestinian refugees comprise about half of the world's Palestinian population. They're numbering in some 6 million, and a lot of them are living in refugee camps without rights, without the ability to work, without the ability to own and pass on land to their family members. And yet somehow they know so much about their homeland, and they know so much that they want to return to it.
During the time I spent at the camp, I became close to Ziad Ishtawi, who I went back to visit. It had been over a year since we last saw each other. Despite our closeness, I never told Ziad that I had a Jewish background. I was afraid of how he would react. I wanted to tell him during my visit.
Just entered Nahra Bered's refugee camp, and we have someone from the Army Intelligence who's escorting us into the camp. This is actually how it started in 1948 when Palestinians fled. They had these little homes, or little tents in many cases, and they basically just kept building on them. And that's what you'll see with these Bet Exat, these prefabricated homes that they were given when they returned to Nahra Bered a few years ago.
I arrived at Ziad's home, made from temporary shipping containers provided by the UN.
شو اخبارك؟ شو اخبارك انت مشتاقين؟ كله تمام، زمان ما شفتك. شو اخبارك؟ الحمد لله. شو بتعملي سمك؟ سمك. مين جاب؟ اهلا.
انا طرتك على الشارع.
انا ما بعرف من وين جايين ويعني كيف حالك؟
تفضلوا.
حبيبي زمان ما شفتك.
شو اخبارك؟
تمام، كيفك انت؟
مشتاقك.
حبيبي انت كمان، كيفك انت؟ من زمان ها؟
Like many refugees in Lebanon, who are prevented by law from working in over 70 professions, Ziad is a laborer, finding work wherever he can. But in the camp, Ziad is known first as a poet. His poems reflect Palestinian refugees' deep love for their homeland and an intense desire to return.
Matthew, one of my family. My sons.
I took that picture in 2008, right after they returned to the camp. And that's Mahmoud. We woke up at like 6 a.m. to go fishing that day, and that's him fishing on the sea here.
أنا فلسطين ما عشت فيها طبعا، أنا من مواليد لبنان يعني. لكن أهلي حكوا لي عن فلسطين. احتلت فلسطين بال48 وهجر الشعب الفلسطيني، هجر لعدة دول منها لبنان. لبنان والأردن وسوريا وشتت يعني على بقاع الأرض. أهلي ودار جدي وبيتنا سكننا لبنان. اجت قرعتنا إنه نسكن يعني بلبنان.
بس هو اجى يعني كان بيفكر بده يرجع يعني على فلسطين صح؟
أبوي هلا هني لما طلعوا بال48 كانوا مفكرين إنه خلال أيام يعني إنه بكرة بتخلص الحرب والعالم ترجع على فلسطين عادي. يعني فعلى أساس إنه إقامة مؤقتة.
خلص مدام بالسواد.
بس ما كانوا عارفين إنه نكست. وأبوي أسس حاله وعمل عيلة وصار عندنا عيلة. بس جذورنا يعني بعدنا كيف إنه منحن لبلدنا.
Although Ziad's parents fled their home in 1948, some of his family remained, including an aunt who stayed with her husband. They have only been able to correspond through letters and the occasional phone call. But in the summer of 2000, both sides of the family traveled to the border, where for a brief moment they were able to see each other again for the first time in 52 years.
أبوي كان شي 59 هيك شيء. كان لأول مرة بشوف أخته على حدود.
أول مرة أبوك شاف أخته؟
سنة 2000.
أول مرة
من 48.
من 48. واو. كيف حسيت لما شفتهم؟
طبعا شعور كتير ما بقدر أوصفه يعني كانت الدموع هي اللي عم بتعبر عن هذا اللقاء يعني اللي تم لمدة حوالي نص ساعة وإحنا نبكي. هن يبكوا ونحن نبكي يعني لأول مرة بنشوف بعض. أبوي يتمسك بالشريط الشائك ما بده يروح، كان يقول ودوني على نحف، أنا شو في إلي بنهر البارد يعني. فكان موقف كتير مؤثر. وللأسف إنه من سنة 2000 أبوي توفى وعمتي توفت وما عادوا شافوا بعض يعني ماتوا بالغربة.
طيب بتحكي مع أولاد هون يعني عن فلسطين
طبعا طبعا فهذه مغروسة. وهي أولادنا بيشربوها مع الحليب يعني with milk يعني مش إنه لا بيشربوها مع الحليب إنه فلسطين وطنك ولابد ما يوم من الأيام تعود لفلسطين. وعدينك يا بلادنا نكون إلك قرابين وهذا وعد يا بلادي وعد الحر بيبقى دين. وهذا وعد لا يمكن ولا حدا يفكر بالعالم كله إنه نتنازل عن حقنا بالعودة لوطننا فلسطين. إذا إحنا ما رجعنا هذا الجيل بده يرجع على فلسطين، إذا مش هذا الجيل اللي بعده.
فلسطين يا وجع العمر يا حلو أحلى من البدر مزروعة بضلوع الصدر روحي تروح فداك
يا بحر ردي طولنا في غيبتنا ودي سلامي ودي.
It was hard to talk openly with Ziad, particularly about my Jewish background, because I felt uncomfortable being followed by the two army minders who took notes on everything we said. It breaks my heart to see this man, who's been like a father to me, yearn for a place that he may never see. I asked Ziad to meet me again the next day, this time by the sea, where we could talk more freely. He's an avid fisherman, so I stopped by a store to buy him a pole so that we could go fishing together.
We are all serious fishermen here.
I know, I bet.
We don't want you insulting the trade part.
So can I catch anything from shore, or do I have to go out in a boat?
From shore you catch nothing.
Okay.
I mean, you get plastic bags, get some rubbish out.
Oh, these fish don't know what they got coming.
You are not going to get any bloody fish.
I will get a fish.
You actually want to fish?
I want to catch a fish, man.
Okay,
I'm
with
serious
this you
about
can.
fishing.
You don't look it serious.
Oh! Got no idea what I'm doing with this thing.
Yes.
قلت لك هدية يعني.
بعدين بتصير تسحب هيك
ايه
شوي شوي.
بعدين بتجيب سمك هيك يعني.
ايه.
We went by boat to a small island off the coast of Tripoli.
يعني يصير ربع ساعة.
انت ما سالتني يعني ليه انا رحت على فلسطين اول مره صح؟ او ما قلت لك ما حكينا في الموضوع.
لا ما حكينا، بس انا بعرف انه انت يعني بعرفك متضامن مع الشعب الفلسطيني.
امي صارت زعلانه. امي يهوديه وصهيونيه يعني. وصارت زعلانه مني.
ليه؟
عشان ما بعرف انا كنت بشتغل يعني بفلسطين وكنت عايش مع فلسطينيين. لما جيت على لبنان ما حكيت كثير في الموضوع.
لا انا اول مره بعرف انه امك يهوديه. شو رايك؟ قد ايه صار لي بعرفك؟
5 سنين
5
او
سنين.
اكثر.
اول مره ومش مشكله عندي، انا بالنسبه لي مش مشكله. تكون امك يهوديه، تكون امك شو ما تكون، هي حره يعني. هي حريه شخصيه. انا بفرق بين اليهودي الصهيوني وبين اليهودي اللي دينه يهودي. قلت لك في كتير يهود ما بيقبلوا بالظلم اللي حاصل على الفلسطينيين.
فكرت يعني ممكن انتوا بتزعلوا مني اذا بيجي على مخيم وناس ما بيعرفوا انه
انا
مثلا اني يهودي يعني.
انا ما بيهمني مين انت. انا بيهمني شو انت، يعني قديش انت قريب من قضيتي كفلسطيني، قديش انا قريب منك كماثيو.
I was glad to finally speak openly with Ziad about my identity, and I was relieved that he didn't associate my Jewish background with Zionism and his suffering. إن شاء الله بشوفك بالنحف. بدي روح شوف مين ابن عمتك.
أنا بكون سعيد جدا لما تتصل في من النحف وبتقول لي أنا ببيتك بنحف.
معقول إنه
رح أكون مبسوط كتير.
It saddened me that as a Jewish American, I could easily travel to the village that Ziad's family came from, but Ziad couldn't. A village that he's waited his entire life to see. When I was growing up in America, this is the image I had of Israel. The beautiful beaches of Tel Aviv, bustling with energy and life. But when I first went to the West Bank in 2003, during the Second Intifada, I saw a much different image of Israel, one of war and occupation. When I went through my first Israeli checkpoint, my world changed. I saw hundreds of Palestinians forced to wait all day under the sun, unable to travel to their towns and villages. I could see the expression on people's faces of being denied, of wondering if they would be able to go home. A young soldier was shouting at a Palestinian man, not even looking him in the eye, just repeating in broken Arabic, "Go back, get out of here." I started to question a lot of things. The narrative I had learned of Israel growing up, the US role in the Middle East, my own identity. I spent much of the next 4 years working as a photographer, documenting Palestinian life under Israeli occupation. In 2007, I was denied entry into Palestine. This was my first time trying to get back in since then. After 4 hours of being held and questioned repeatedly by Israeli border guards, I finally entered Israel-Palestine. After arriving in the West Bank, I went to the Balata refugee camp, where I had lived for 6 months in 2005 and 2006. I started a photo school called Picture Balata. I wanted to give youth in the camp the tools to document their own stories. Butch was one of the young photographers from the program.
Welcome to the refugee camp, man. سنة ونص يعني تقريبا. Just asked him how his prison. He was in there for a year and a half. مين يعني كيف رحت على السجن؟ يعني مين سجن شو يعني؟ خبرنا كيف.
هم اجى خذوني من الدار اليهود.
من الدار. The Israeli soldiers used to always come in from right here, and they would enter the camp, and they would clash with the fighters in the camp on a nightly basis. شنو؟ لا إسرائيليين ما بفوتوا.
بفوتوا.
عن جد؟
كل يوم.
لسه؟
يوم بعد يوم.
عن جد؟ افتكرت خلاص هاي.
Palestinian refugees are not only exiled to neighboring countries like Lebanon, they also live in camps like this one throughout the West Bank and Gaza.
أكبر عدد سكان في المخيم وأصغر مساحة من الضفة وأصغر مساحة في الضفة برضه. على كيلو متر مكعب في 35,000 نسمة سكان.
Balata was a flashpoint during both the first and second intifadas.
شو اسمك؟ جديد محمد خالد. انت هلا جيت من السجن؟ من كم شهر؟ شهرين. كم سنة؟
11 سنة.
نعم. ليش يعني؟ ليش انت كنت في السجن؟
على النشاطات العسكرية في الانتفاضة.
شكلك كثير مبسوط هلا.
طبعا حرية هاي.
This is a Mukhayyam Balata refugee camp street. يا ابو جبران يا طه يا زارورة كيفك؟ أهلا هون كيف حالك يا أستاذ؟
Taha and Safa were two of my other photo students. I wanted to help them share their stories with Americans, so I arranged a photo tour across the US. It was an opportunity for them to travel freely that they rarely have. Israel's occupation restricts Palestinian movement around the West Bank and makes life increasingly difficult. Many youth will become political prisoners at one point in their lives. This is Israel's wall in the occupied West Bank. But it's not just a wall that separates Palestinians. It's what people have termed a geography of occupation that also involves roads, settlements, military outposts, creating islands of unconnected Palestinian land. Irene Nasser is a journalist and a Palestinian citizen of Israel. She documents Israel's encroachment on Palestinian lands.
I think people don't understand what the occupation looks like, or like what it actually means to live here as a Palestinian. I think they have no concept. So this is Road 6. It's a toll road. This road connects the south from Bir Saba to the north to Haifa area. They could have confiscated land from Israeli Jews, but instead they decided to build it through the strip of Palestinian villages, and as a result it divided Palestinian villages from this side to Palestinian villages on this side. One of the ways that they do that is that they confiscate it for military purposes per se, but then slowly there are outposts built on it. I'm sure that the eventual purpose is to take all land, but it is done in an incredibly planned out and sophisticated way. The settlements are choking Palestinian populations. They're being built in strips or in like specific paths and chunks, leaving the West Bank and Palestinian areas just into these tiny little pockets. The two-state solution? Where and how?
We were headed to Nahef in northern Israel, Ziad's family's village that I promised him I'd visit.
I've been to this greater area, but definitely never to this village. It's amazing how many people here have family members who left in 1948 thinking they were, going to escape fighting for 1 or 2 days and then could never return after that, 65 years later.
Ziad's cousin, Abu Muhammad, welcomed us to the village. The only time that Abu Muhammad had met Ziad was at the Lebanese-Israeli border in 2000.
كتب اسمه مين؟
زياد عاد زياد
زياد شتاوي؟
اي نعم ولكن الصيغه غطت شوي وعبرت عنها وكانه في قلبي والقلب سكر عليه.
Wow. Abu Muhammad took me around the village and introduced me to the extended family.
كيف حالك؟ شو اخبارك منقوشه؟
منقوشه ومحمر وخبز.
Oh, they're making homemade bread and منقوشه. ممكن من فوق؟ واو الله يعطيك العافيه. This is Abu Mahmoud's cousins, some more of his cousins. It's a massive family. I'm having a really hard time keeping track. They got some chickens down here too, the olive trees they make olive oil from. Oh! Ah. Wow. كيف حالك؟ أنا اسمي ماثيو كاسل.
والنعم أحمد إبراهيم
أحمد
سعيد
إبراهيم سعيد.
الكني أبو أتسية ابن عمته لزياد.
أنا قبل يومين كنت عنده بالمخيم نهر البيري بلبنان.
شفنا أخبار هنا وشفنا كيف إنه دمروا كيف كان القصف والضرب والضيقة اللي عاشوا فيها أهلنا وحبايبنا عايشين في النهر البارد. نتمنى الرحمة للي ماتوا، نتمنى الحياة السعيدة للي بعدين طيبين موجودين في الحياة.
We set up a computer to call Ziad over Skype so the two families could meet again.
ألو ألو حج تسمع؟
كيفكم يا قرايبيني؟ كيفكم يا أولاد بلدي؟
هلا بيك.
زياد أبو محمود كيف حالك؟ خالي السلام عليكم. بيحكي أبو حسن أحمد إبراهيم سعيد ابن خالك. احنا هون نتمنى لكم السلامة والصحة والعافية تشوفونا على الأمد، مش نشوف بعضنا بالتلفزيون على البليفون وعلى التلفون وعلى الأشياء اللي عن الشكل. صغيرة هبة.
هي كلهم. هاي هبة أصغر واحدة.
هاي مدلل يا
يلا بدنا ندبر لها عريس من نحف. عندي إن الشرف يا خالي. غالي هلا بابن عمتي.
هلا حبيبي.
القرعة الحلوة هذا مواطيبها.
هاي من التقينا في الحدود.
نعم.
طلبت مني طلب انت احط لك تاريخ في نحف. نقلت اسمك الحاج زياد فلسطين سنة 2001 على عرق شجرة نخل صغير ارتفاعها 20 متر بتعبر عن الحب والاشتياق لك، فكانت في شكل قلب لوز والشجرة عمالة تغطي القلب وكأنه اسمك محفوظ بداخل القلب ومغطى عليه إن شاء الله.
وأنا أسميكوا يا خالي واسم نحف بقلبي. أنا إذا اسمي على شجرة بنحف أنتوا أسميكوا بقلبي يا خالي. أنا نحف كلها بقلبي. اسمعني يا خال.
نعم معك.
الله يخليك يا رب، الله يجمعنا على خير يا خالي.
إن شاء الله يا الله، إن شاء الله يا الله بيجمعنا ببيت واحد يا الله.
We tried to continue the call on my cell phone so Ziad could see the village, but the connection was lost.
ألو ألو.
Although Ziad cannot return to his village, in the Israeli settlement of Karnai Shamron in the West Bank, Jews from all over the world can come and live in what they consider to be their homeland from more than 2,000 years ago. I met with Ellie Pieperts, a recent settler from the U.S. city of Seattle, and a spokesperson for the Yesha Council, an organization that represents different groups of settlers.
How about yourself? Where are you from in the States?
Chicago. Born and raised.
Cubs or White Sox?
Started as a Cubs fan my whole life.
Okay, let's leave it at that for this interview. So this is our home.
Yeah, you're beautiful.
Yeah,
Beautiful.
it is nice.
Yeah.
I mean, it's not so. You see, it's not so big. We have 2 rooms over there, one room there. Then upstairs, just a loft.
Yeah.
With the master. That's it.
Do you speak Hebrew?
I mean, I did study, but there's one thing reading the books, another thing conversing.
I studied for my bar mitzvah when I was 13, and I don't think any of that is useful in Israel. You got the hanging garlic.
Yeah.
What's that all about? Is that to keep the vampires away? Or?
I don't know.
Is there some tradition there?
I think it's just more food.
Yeah.
One of the nice things about this community is that you have people who are Orthodox, people who are not Orthodox, but everybody here sees themselves as being Jewish.
Yeah.
So that's the unifying aspect of Israel, but also particularly of Judea and Samaria. We all are living here and growing the next chain in the Jewish people. Our generation, this generation right now, is the first generation where we have an amazing life back wherever country we're from, certainly in America. But now we decided to come here and make a better life.
Even with all the problems of the Middle East and the stuff you hear about, in this country in particular.
We're here because we're trying to be true to ourselves and who we really are. And that is being Jewish in a complete, holistic way.
Do you also consider yourself a Zionist in the political sense?
I think so. I mean, it's a tricky word. Obviously, the UN has tried to tackle it.
So tell me what it is. Describe Zionism.
I really don't know how people see it, and that's not a word that I usually would just use to describe myself. In certain communities, it has very positive connotations. Certain communities, it has more negative connotations.
We hear about communities like this, settlements in the West Bank, as being a hindrance to the peace process or moving forward any kind of peaceful resolution to this conflict? How do you respond to?
I find that whole proposition to be very, very problematic and questionable. What I found to be the most eye-opening was the first time that my wife talked about it when she went to the grocery store and wanted to reach for a box of Cheerios, because my kids wanted Cheerios, and there was an American product there. And there was an Arab mom who was reaching for the same box of Cheerios as she was. And there was a connection. It was like, we both want to raise our kids. And I think more interactions like that gives hope.
But what if there's only one box of Cheerios left? Who gets it?
There's never one box of Cheerios.
No, I think what you were saying was interesting, and I'm not used to hearing it.
Yeah.
Because a Palestinian state, if there were to be a two-state solution, would it incorporate areas like this one, the settlements in the West Bank?
I don't know. I mean, honestly, I can't really imagine a Palestinian state actually occurring here. Israel needs this land for its biblical integrity, for its security integrity, and just for natural growth. It's all part of the same tapestry, and it's not inconsistent with Arabs and Palestinians living here.
I know you might want to pause because your lovely family's just arrived.
Eli finds it important that Jewish families like his have the right to move and live in Israel, but he didn't recognize the Palestinian right to return.
Yes, it's not the same thing. If you want to say there are Palestinians who left after the 1948 war, they have a right to come back. No, that doesn't make any sense, and there's no other country in the world that has any concept along those lines. Once you feel you have a national identity, it's real to you. And I don't mean to minimize that, because it is real to them. But practically, what does that mean? Does that mean they have a right to come and take land and come here? No.
Throughout the conflict, there has been a tendency to negate the national identity of the other side. On the Palestinian side, to say there is no Jewish national claim or history here. And on the Jewish side, to say there's an Arab nation, but there's no separate Palestinian nation. When you deny somebody's identity and their story, they will find that unbearable and unacceptable. That's a challenge to their most basic being.
Gershom Gorenberg, an Israeli journalist and historian, is critical of the settlements and questions the commonly held narrative of Israel's history.
I learned that everything I knew before had been wrong. I saw that the level of political backing from within the government and actual government initiating of the settlement project was much more extensive and important than is part of the wider narrative. And I also saw that from the beginning there were people warning of various levels of why this was a mistake. It's precisely from within the perspective of being somebody who is committed to Israel and committed to Israel's future and committed to Judaism that I see this process as being, in a long-term way, destructive of the state of Israel.
A lot of Israeli settlements like this one just here, which is called Halamish, take Palestinian resources such as water. Halamish is taking a natural spring and using it for the settlers and preventing the Palestinians who have used it for many years from accessing that water. Every Friday, the villagers try to go demand access to that natural spring that they say belongs to them, and they're prevented from doing so by Israeli soldiers who are going to come out and block this road that we're walking down now and clash with Palestinians from the village, preventing them from getting to that water.
This weekly protest has become a gathering place for Palestinian solidarity activists, including many Israelis and Europeans.
لكل العالم من هذه القرية الصغيرة نقول أننا باقون أننا مستمرون أننا على العهد حتى تحقيق حلمنا في حريتنا.
I was a Black Hawk pilot in the Israeli Air Force, and I realized that I'm fighting on the wrong side. As a Jew, as an Israeli, I feel that it's my responsibility to be here.
And how much of Israeli society do you think you represent and the things you just said?
Very little percent, but in many years from now, Israelis will all say, oh, we were against the apartheid. Just like today in South Africa, you go and every policeman will say, I was always against the apartheid.
Right, but they took part in it.
Yeah.
I am the cameraman in the village, and I had to film everything happened in the village since about 3.5 years. From that time till now, I began to document everything happened in the village. Be careful from it.
So Bilal, the videographer from the village who we were just speaking to, right now it looks like he's put into the back of an Israeli Jeep. That white truck, I believe, is spraying skunk, that disgusting smelling spray. Oh, they just got that guy big time. You okay?
It's your first time here?
First time to Nabi Saleh, yeah.
Oh.
So what just happened right now? Did they just held you for a minute, right?
Yes.
Did they tell you to stop filming or to move away?
That's what usually happened every Friday with me. Many times they arrest me for the whole day. Once they arrest me for 4 days, either to keep me away from the demonstration and to document what's happened in the village here.
There is Israeli law said that if the Palestinian doesn't work in their land for 3 years, they declare it state land. So it's not that we don't want to work in the land, but we can't reach the lands. And of course, soldiers are protecting settlers all the time. It's another way of stealing and confiscating the Palestinian lands.
The Israeli government is not only taking lands in the occupied West Bank, but it's also taking lands from Palestinians inside of Israel. For centuries, the Negev Desert in southern Israel has been home to Palestinian Bedouins. Shehda Ben Berry is a Palestinian Bedouin lawyer in Israel, fighting a new bill by the government designed to confiscate Bedouin lands and move them to more concentrated urban areas.
Here I was born, some 100 meters from here, and they forced my family also to move from here. They use a lot of ways to force people out from the place. They put that this is a dangerous firing area in Hebrew, in English, even not in Arabic.
No Arabic.
No Arabic. They are not recognizing anything Arabic. No lands, no trees, no homes, nothing.
Shehda Ben Berry took me to the house of a Bedouin family. Their home was deemed illegal by the Israeli government. The government refused to provide the village with public utilities, so they were forced to install solar panels and bring in their own water supply.
Yeah, bring in water by those tanks. Where are they? Ah, yes, those tanks. Because of the lack of the water, you see the olives are very dry now.
Oh, wow, yeah.
Yes. And here, 700 meters from here, you have the individual farms. So it's so easy to supply this place with water and electricity also. Yes.
Individual farms are Jewish-owned settlements inside of Israel, often built on confiscated land. Even though many of their Bedouin neighbors are refused basic public services, individual farmers are provided with the electricity and water that's needed to grow healthy crops.
This is a marriage ceremony that we're watching with horses running by. It's celebrating this young man who's about to get married. He's from this Bedouin community right here. عفوا ايش اسمك؟
سامي الجماعي.
كم سنة يعني أنتوا عايشين هون بالقرية؟
جينا فوق 40 سنة يعني. العادة من جدودنا يعني من زمان بالحياة.
عادات البدو زمان.
عادات البدو يعني.
كل حياتهم. البلد زي قريت قاعد تركب على خيل وتتلفلف على خيل زي هيك.
تقدرش فهم لك.
كان على الشارع يعني. أو على الكيكار بتقدر تسوي تلف من الكيكار للكيكار. شيء هيك يعني.
It's destruction of the whole way of thinking, of life, of culture, of tradition. This is the problem.
My mom once said that as Jews, Israel is who we are. But when I hear stories like the Bedouins, it's hard for me to believe that Israel is a part of me. Before returning home, I went to the Wailing Wall in Jerusalem. I wanted to talk to my mom and have an honest conversation about our differing views on Israel, but she wouldn't appear in the film. She was afraid of the backlash from her Jewish community in the US. So I wrote her a letter.
I came here with my mom once and I saw what a special place it was for her. And I understand, for Jews, this is the holiest site in the world.
And it was nice to see my mom feeling something greater, something more spiritual perhaps when she came here. And I like being here with her. But then, I mean, right in the middle of it, there's Israeli flags, these soldiers with guns all over the place that really ruined the whole spiritual event for me. So you've politicized it with this symbol of the state of Israel, which is for Palestinians and for many others, you know, a symbol of oppression, occupation. For me, the two should have nothing to do with each other.
Even though my mom wasn't willing to appear in the film, she did want to share her perspective. So she wrote me a letter. Dear Matt, the Holocaust was recent history when I was young, and the people that I knew who were touched by it talked about it under their breath in whispers like it was a shenda, a word used in Judaism to mean disgrace, shame. Now we had a home where Nazis, crusaders, Tsars couldn't extinguish us just because of our religion. You were born at a different time in Israel's history. It was no longer a wonderful dream, an ideal. Rather, it was a reality. As the region got hotter, the idea of who was the aggressor got muddied in some people's eyes, never in mine. Our history together on this topic got more and more difficult, and you became immersed in it and so passionate. Though I appreciated your devotion, I couldn't understand where your passion was coming from and the degree of your fervor. Our dinner table conversations became a battleground, and every topic found its way back to the Middle East. So even today, as I love you as my son, and I feel you are hardworking and smart, I do not appreciate the fact that you can't see why I am so devoted to Israel. But it's a conversation that needs context. I will always love you, and when we have disagreements on anything in life, we will have to agree to disagree, with respect. This one is no different. Love, Mom. I'm definitely, you know, her son once again, so I think that's great. I understand for her that being Jewish meant something much different than it does for many Jews in my generation, and especially the Holocaust. I wasn't really aware that, you know, there was this kind of shame around it. You know, I'm growing up in a different time, and younger Jews in the US and around the world are growing up in a much different time where we're not living in the shadow of the Holocaust or the shame that she refers to. I don't need Israel to make me feel proud about my identity. And she even admits that she's unwilling to really ask a serious question or any serious questions about Israel and its policies. She says she's going to support them no matter what. And I think that's where the problem occurs. So you're a victim, you've suffered, we realize that, we recognize that, but we also have to be sure that your victim, your victimization doesn't victimize another people as it has in what's going on in Israel and Palestine. For Israel and its supporters, the long and difficult history of Jews in Europe made the realization of the Jewish state a dream. But a dream is no longer a dream when it becomes a nightmare for someone else. That's the Palestinian experience since 1948, and it's a story that I believe needs to be told.